Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be looking at quarterly returns. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, of course, I imagine you guys are familiar with the monthly charts that we often talk about, but I thought it might be worthwhile to take a look at quarterly returns for Bitcoin and especially compare to prior pre-halving years. Okay? Now, one of the things you'll notice throughout all of history is that, just sort of at an initial glance, right? It seems like Q2 and Q4 are often the best quarters for Bitcoin, right? In terms of, not necessarily in terms of percent gain, but just simply in terms of how often the quarter is green versus how often it's red, right? Out of all the Q2s, there's only been three second quarters of the year that were in fact red, right? 2018, 2021, and 2022. Even 2014, which was a bear market year, had a green Q2, and 2015, which was a pre-halving year, had a green Q2. But what I want to talk about is this idea, and the idea is definitely being tested right now, so don't get me wrong, right? But the idea that in pre-halving years, we tend to spend half the year going up and half the year going down. That doesn't necessarily mean that the starting point and the ending point are the same, right? In 2015, of course, we double bottomed, and then we went higher into the end of the year. In 2019, we sort of came back down to a higher low and then just stayed there, through December going into the beginning of the halving year. But if you sort of take this one pre-halving year at a time, what you'll notice is that, 2011, the first two quarters were green. The second two quarters were red, right? So two green quarters, two red quarters. In 2015, Q1 and Q3 were red, Q2 and Q4 were green, right? So you still have half up and half down in terms of, about approximately half the time going up, half the time going down, but it was spread out somewhat differently, right? So 2011, it was two green, two red. 2015 was red, green, red, green. 2019 was two green, two red, right? Two green and then two red months, two red quarters. Q3, Q4 came in red after seeing a pretty sizable move to the upside in Q1 and Q2. And then in 2023, you can see that at least so far, it has mimicked 2011 and 2019 closer in the sense that Q1 and Q2 were green, and then Q3 was red, right? So when you look at prior pre-halving years where the first two quarters were green and the third quarter was red, you can see that's exactly what happened in 2011. You can see that's exactly what happened in 2019. 2015 is an outlier where Q3 was still red, but Q4 ended up being green, because we had a red Q1. So when you look at this table right now, right, you can see two green and one red quarter, and then the current quarter, we're looking at Bitcoin being up about 6%, right? About a 6% move, which is a substantial move. But again, we still have about 2.5 months to go, and we'll have to wait and see how it ultimately materializes. If you go look at the Bitcoin chart today, we're actually above 29K. On a monthly basis, Bitcoin is up, as we said, it's up about, right now I guess it's about 8%, right? So the quarterly return, we're only updating this every, once a day. And so right now it shows 6%, but it's actually up 8% because we just had another move by Bitcoin just after the daily open. So quarterly, though, there still is a long ways to go. And one of the things that I think back to, and again, like I try to remind myself that, of course, it does not have to play out in the same way, but I can't help but remind myself of the similarities, right? And it seems like a lot of us sort of get sucked into thinking this time is different quite frequently, when so far things have played out in a very similar manner, right? And again, things can't always deviate from the past, but so far we have not necessarily seen that. For instance, you had a low here, the end of 2018. You had a low here, the end of 2022. We had a June low in 2018 and a June low in 2022. If you remember back in the summer of 2022, there were a lot of people that were very vocal that this was in fact the bottom, right? 17.5. We said no, they're probably making the same mistakes that the people over here made, and we likely will break to the downside once we can, once the lower highs ultimately meet the higher lows, we'll likely break to the downside. And eventually, that's what we did, right? Eventually, we broke down, we went lower in Q4, right? And the capitulation happened in November, right? The capitulation here occurred in November. Now, again, a low in June, a capitulation in November. A low in June, a capitulation in November. A potential, well, here, a yearly high in the summer. This is a potential yearly high in the summer. I've said I think it could be the yearly high. Of course, that theory is being tested right now, so that theory could, of course, prove to be wrong or incorrect. But at this point, it's played out in an eerily similar fashion, right? Eerily similar fashion. And furthermore, what is interesting is we talked about how Bitcoin normally gets a death cross rally, right? It got a death cross rally here, and now it's getting a death cross rally again. Now, again, a lot of people are going to argue this, and say, well, no, it's not going to play out the same way. And again, you should not completely discount their view. I mean, like they could be right? I mean, again, like there's all probabilities. Like I can't for sure say what's going to happen, but when I look at this, it still has played out in a very similar fashion, where you have a June low in 2018 and then 2022, a November low in 2018 and then 2022, or December, right? Just in Q4, a potential top in the summer of the pre-halving year, and then a fade, and then a rally into the death cross. Now, what's interesting is if you look at this move over here, right? And by the way, we also said another similarity was that Bitcoin typically breaks down below its bull market support band in August or September. It's done it every pre-halving year, and this one was no different, right? If you think back to the summer, I mean, a ton of bullish people that were hoping to see 40K, and we said, look, guys, we're likely going to get a seasonal correction by the S&P 500 in Q3 of the pre-election year, and it's likely going to drop Bitcoin below its bull market support band. And again, just like it did last cycle, that's what happened. Just like in 2015, and in 2011, where there was a drop in Q3 and it went below the bull market support band, right here. So it's happened every pre-halving year. But again, before that, tons of people saying, no, right? This time will be different. It won't happen, right? It won't happen. And then it did happen. So then what I do is I come back and say, well, where are we now, right? Where are we now? Because we certainly had a death cross. We've definitely had a rally into the death cross, which we said we could likely get. And the question is have we deviated from prior expectations? That's always the question we must ask ourselves. Have we deviated from prior expectations? And at this point, the answer still remains no. That could change, right? It could certainly change. But at this point, the answer remains no. You may say, well, why? I mean, this seems like a pretty nice rally for Bitcoin. How can you say this was in prior expectations? Well, we said we could rally back up sort of the breakdown point, right? We said that. And in fact, we said it back when Bitcoin was at like 26K. We made a video on that. It was sort of the most optimistic scenario that I sort of forecast. And now that we're there, I'm like, well, we'll see. We'll see if my most optimistic forecast was maybe not optimistic enough. But this move up, this long wick here that you see, very similar wick actually in 2019 as well. And if you don't remember, it was this wick here, right? You'll see Bitcoin had a nice long wick to the upside to just below where we started to break down from that wick, right? Now, after it had this long wick to the upside, it did not just immediately retrace. I mean, we can see when you zoom out, right, it certainly looks like it did. But what really happened is after this long wick up, we then basically went sideways in that range for approximately 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Okay? And then it rolled over and put in a lower low from this low in November. November is an interesting month because it does tend to often correspond with moves down in the price of Bitcoin in pre-halving years and in bear market years, right? So if you were to go look at 2018, right, in 2018, while the move did not finalize until December, you'll note that it kicked off in mid-November, right? The drop by Bitcoin started in mid-November. And then here in 2019, right, in the pre-halving year, you can see that once we got into November, that was where things started to go south for Bitcoin and where it rolled over and put in that lower low. So bear market year, November drop, pre-halving year, November drop. And then you fast forward to bear market year 2022, November drop. So then the question is, well, is this just going to sort of materialize in the same way where after getting this long wick, we see Bitcoin go sideways for, maybe approximately 2 weeks? That would take you all the way out until the last day of October, in fact, where we might just stay within this range. It'd be kind of interesting if it did, because if it did, it would still be within prior expectations. Even though it might not seem like it still would be. And then the question, of course, is in November, does it actually roll over? Now, you might be wondering, like, why am I talking about all this? I mean, I thought the video was about quarterly returns. Well, it is. But that's the point, is that every prior pre-halving year, we've had 2 green quarters and 2 red quarters. In 2011, 2 green, 2 red. 2015, 2 green, 2 red. 2019, 2 green, 2 red. So far, 2023, 2 green, 1 red. This one is currently green, but it is still pending. And at one point in 2019, Q4 was green, right? If you were to look at that move that initially took place, right here, it would have been green for a while, and then it still ended up closing the quarter red. So I think when I look at this, and I see that we are in fact up in October, obviously I'm not trying to diminish that or discount that or anything. What I am trying to say is that every prior pre-halving year, we saw Bitcoin roll over in every prior pre-halving year, we had 2 green quarters and 2 red quarters. In this bear market year, 2022, we saw a drop in November. In the bear market year 2018, we saw a drop in November. In the pre-halving year of 2019, we saw a drop in November, and we're now coming up on November here in just under a couple of weeks. So what I would say is, if by the end of the month, Bitcoin is still kind of in this range where it hasn't really decisively put in new highs, and let's say it's still sort of putting in levels below this wick, then is it going to play out in a very similar manner as 2019, where we still closed Q4 red, even though it started off as green? Now, you might say, well, Ben, there's a lot of bullish momentum here, right? A lot of bullish momentum. And look, guys, in 2019, the wick in 2019 was even more impressive. I mean, if you think this wick is great, imagine what 2019 was like, because 2019 was actually a lot more impressive. This move that Bitcoin had back in 2019, this move here, from the bottom of this wick here, from when the death cross started, that was a 44% move. The wick in just this daily candle, just forget the initial move that was a 16.5% move, but just looking at this daily candle in this wick, that was a 21% rally. A 21% rally. So you go and look at it today, how long was that wick to the upside from that open? it was only a 10% rally, right? So yes, I mean, you can say there's momentum to the upside, but there was also momentum to the upside in 2019 as well, and it still eventually rolled over and took out the prior low that it had set going into that death cross rally. So at this point, I do not think that we have, you know, diverged from prior expectations. I think it is playing out in a very similar manner, and I think the thing to watch for over the next week and a half is, does it just simply stay range bound in this area, or does it actually break out to a new yearly high? If it breaks out to a new yearly high, then it's sort of back to the drawing board, right? If it doesn't break out to a new yearly high, then it is still within the expectations that we previously set of a death cross rally that could retrace to just below this wick, right? And now we just kind of have to wait and see what happens over the next week and a half, and then see if November sort of repeats itself as a month where Bitcoin drops. No guarantees about anything, but, and I've said this before, the reason that Bitcoin, in my opinion, is going up right now, contrary to maybe what crypto Twitter is saying, is that it's a liquidity drain. It's a liquidity drain from the rest of the crypto market. Okay? Now, a lot of people don't buy that, but I say, if it was a lot of new money coming into the market, why has total market cap basically been going sideways since February? And in fact, did not even put in a high in the summer, right? It was a lower high. The actual high for total market cap occurred in April. So how can we even say at this point that Bitcoin, the price increase in Bitcoin is, I don't think it's representative of new money coming into the market. I think it's just watching other money from altcoins make its way into Bitcoin. Okay, so I guess the question is well, what if this is just sort of like a descending triangle that eventually breaks to the downside, and then maybe you have some type of massive Wyckoff accumulation type thing where you get a pretty deep spring, maybe in Q1 of 2024, like down here, followed by another move to the upside. Right? There's a chance that could happen. I know a lot of people, might not believe that, and it might not happen, but there's a chance that something like that could happen, which would be interesting because you'd basically have a period where the total market cap just went sideways, even if it came back down here and then moved up. You'd have a period where the total market cap just went sideways, but there is a complete rotation of capital from from high risk assets to lower risk assets, right? So I'm still waiting to see, what sort of happens as we get into the latter part of October, what transpires in November. November has been a risky month for Bitcoin in the past two bear market years and in the past pre-halving year. So we'll see if that transpires. And just sort of remind people that quarterly returns, prior pre-halving years, 2 green, 2 red, every single time. So we'll see if this time is different. I'm guessing it's not. But we'll take it one day at a time. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.